Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today, I want to tell you a story. It's a story about coffee, but even more, it's a story about people, habits, and everyday life in America. Let's begin. In the early 1970s, coffee in the United States was simple and unimportant. Most Americans drank coffee at home in the morning. They poured it into a mug, drank it quickly, and rushed to work. Coffee was not about taste. It was not about atmosphere. It was not something people talked about. If people drank coffee outside their homes, they usually drank it in diners. Diners were loud and busy. You sat down, ordered coffee, drank it, and left. There was no reason to stay. Coffee was cheap, fast, and forgettable. At that time, no one imagined that coffee could become a lifestyle. Then, in 1971, a small coffee shop opened in Seattle. At first, it looked nothing like the cafes we know today. There were no coffee drinks, no lattes, no cappuccinos. The shop sold coffee beans and equipment. Its goal was simple: offer better quality coffee to people who cared about flavor. This idea was unusual in America. Most people believed coffee was all the same. But this small shop believed something different. It believed that coffee could be an experience, not just a drink. In the beginning, this idea attracted only a small group of customers, people who were curious, people who wanted something new. Nothing suggested that this shop would change how millions of people live their daily lives. The real change began when the company stopped thinking only about coffee and started thinking about people. They asked a simple but powerful question. What if coffee was not something you drink quickly, but something you slow down for? This question changed the direction of the company. Instead of focusing only on the product, they focused on the environment. They imagined a place where people could sit comfortably, relax without pressure, talk or stay silent, and not feel rushed. At that time, this kind of public space was rare in the United States. Life was fast. Work was stressful. Public places were designed for speed, not comfort. This coffee shop decided to create something different. Not a restaurant, not a diner, not a bar, but a calm space in the middle of a busy city. As more stores opened, something interesting happened. People didn't just come for coffee anymore. They stayed. They brought books. They brought notebooks. They brought laptops. Some people came with friends. Others came alone. And slowly, this place became part of daily routine. People started to say, "I'll meet you there. I'll stop there before work. I'll work from there today." These sentences were new. Coffee shops had never played this role before. The cafe became a reference point in everyday life. And when a place becomes part of routine, it begins to shape behavior. People started to talk differently. They spoke more softly. They waited their turn. They asked polite questions. They didn't rush. The environment changed communication. Fast places create fast language. Slow places create calm language. Without planning it, this coffee shop created one of the most comfortable public spaces in America. A place where accents were normal. Short answers were acceptable. Mistakes were ignored. People didn't come to judge each other. They came to sit, to think, to breathe. This is why this story matters. Because this company did not just change coffee. It changed how Americans use public space, talk to strangers, and feel comfortable being quiet together. In the next parts of this video, we'll look closer at what happens inside this space. You'll hear how people actually speak, why sentences are short, and why this kind of English feels easier to understand. But the most important thing to remember is this. This company became powerful not because of coffee, but because it understood human behavior. And when you understand human behavior, you understand language. This is only the beginning of the story. How Starbucks became part of everyday American life. As more stores opened, something unexpected began to happen. People were no longer visiting this coffee shop only when they needed caffeine. They were visiting it when they needed space. Space to think, space to wait, space to slow down. This was new. In American cities, public space had always been loud or rushed. Restaurants wanted you to eat and leave. Diners were busy and noisy. Libraries were silent and formal. There were very few places where you could simply sit without pressure. This coffee shop quietly filled that gap. People began to build small routines around it. They stopped there before work. They stopped there between meetings. They stopped there after work, not because they were hungry, but because they were tired. Over time, the coffee shop stopped feeling like a business and started feeling like part of daily life. This is an important moment in the story, because when a business becomes part of routine, people stop thinking about it. And when people stop thinking, they start trusting. Trust is more powerful than advertising. People trusted that this place would always be there. They trusted it would feel familiar. They trusted it would be predictable. Predictability is comforting. When you walk into a Starbucks, you already know what will happen. You know where to stand, where to order, where to wait, where to sit. This removes stress. And when stress is removed, people open up. They speak more naturally. They act more like themselves. This environment slowly changed how Americans behave in public. Before, sitting alone in public felt strange. If someone sat alone for a long time, it felt uncomfortable or suspicious. But in Starbucks, sitting alone became normal. People sat alone with laptops. People sat alone with headphones. People sat alone with notebooks. No one asked questions. No one stared. This quietly changed social rules. Being alone in public was no longer a problem. And this change affected language. People began to speak more softly. They avoided interrupting. They used polite, indirect phrases. Instead of demanding, they asked. Instead of rushing, they waited. You could hear phrases like, "Is this seat taken? Do you mind if I sit here? Are you done with this chair?" These sentences are simple, but they show something important. They show respect for personal space. This kind of language grows only in environments where people are allowed to stay. Another change happened quietly. Work followed people into coffee shops. Laptops appeared. Phones appeared. Headphones appeared. The coffee shop became a temporary office. This changed how people talked to each other. They stopped starting conversations aggressively. They spoke carefully. They kept conversations short. They respected silence. This created a very specific kind of English. Short sentences, soft tone, minimal emotion. This is the English many immigrants hear every day. And often they think, why does English sound so cold? Why do people speak so little? But this is not coldness. It is space. Starbucks helped normalize quiet coexistence. People could sit next to each other for hours without speaking. This is not loneliness. This is comfort. And comfort changes language. Another important moment in this story is when Starbucks became a meeting place. People started saying, "Let's meet at Starbucks." Not for dinner, not for an event, just to talk. This matters, because meeting just to talk requires a neutral place. Not too personal, not too formal. Starbucks was perfect. Because of this, conversations there became very casual. No big topics, no deep discussions, just light, safe talk. How's your day going? Busy today? Working or relaxing? These phrases are everywhere now, but they didn't appear by accident. They appeared because people needed language that matched the environment. Short, polite, non-intrusive language. For immigrants, this environment is extremely important because it removes pressure. You don't need long explanations. You don't need perfect grammar. You only need to be understandable. And Starbucks trained Americans to listen for meaning, not perfection. Baristas hear hundreds of accents every day. They don't correct grammar. They don't interrupt. They simply move the conversation forward. This teaches customers to do the same. Mistakes stop mattering. Meaning becomes more important than form. This is one of the biggest hidden effects of Starbucks on American life. It didn't just create a coffee habit, it created a communication habit. a habit of listening quickly, responding politely, and not making a big deal out of small mistakes. Over time, this habit spread beyond coffee shops. You can now see it in co-working spaces, libraries, airports, waiting areas. But it started here. Another important change is emotional. Starbucks became a place people go when they need comfort, after bad days, before stressful meetings, during lonely moments. It is familiar. Familiar places feel safe. Safe places allow people to be quiet, and quiet places create softer language. This is why English in Starbucks feels different from English on the street. On the street, people are rushed. In Starbucks, people slow down. And slowing down changes everything. By the time Starbucks spread across the country, it had already become invisible. It no longer felt new. It felt normal. This is the most powerful position a brand can have. When something becomes normal, it becomes permanent. And when it becomes permanent, it shapes behavior without effort. This is why Starbucks matters, not because of coffee, but because it changed how Americans use public space, how they sit together, how they speak to strangers, and how comfortable they feel being quiet. In the next part, we move closer, from culture to interaction, from environment to words. You will hear what actually happens when people order, respond, and move through this space. This is where language becomes very clear. What really happens when you order at Starbucks, and why it changed coffee forever. To understand what really happens when you order at Starbucks today, we first need to understand what ordering coffee looked like before Starbucks existed. In the 1960s and early 1970s, ordering coffee in America was extremely simple. You walked into a diner, you sat down. A waitress poured coffee into your cup, often before you even asked. There were no choices, no sizes, no milk options, no names. Coffee was coffee. It usually cost 10 to 25 cents per cup, and it was often refilled for free. Nobody talked about quality. Nobody talked about origin. Nobody asked questions. Coffee was not personal. It was fuel. This is the world Starbucks entered in 1971. At that time, the idea of ordering coffee did not really exist. You didn't choose your drink. You accepted what was there. Starbucks slowly changed this. At first, very slowly. In the 1970s, Starbucks stores didn't sell prepared drinks at all. They sold beans, by the pound. High-quality beans, imported beans, beans that smelled different from diner coffee. This alone was unusual. In the early 1980s, something important happened. The company began introducing espresso drinks. This was radical. Most Americans had never heard words like latte, cappuccino, espresso. These were European words, foreign words. For many people, they sounded strange and unnecessary, and they were expensive. In the early 1980s, a cup of coffee at Starbucks could cost 75 cents to $1.25. That may not sound expensive today, but at that time, it was 3 to 5 times more expensive than diner coffee. People were shocked. Many thought, why would anyone pay this much for coffee? But something else was happening. When customers paid more, they behaved differently. They slowed down. They paid attention. They stayed. And this changed ordering itself. For the first time, Americans had to say what they wanted. Not just coffee, but a drink, a size, sometimes a milk. This required interaction, and interaction required language. At first, ordering felt awkward. People didn't know how to say these new words. They mispronounced them. They laughed. They felt embarrassed. But Starbucks didn't correct them. They just kept serving. Over time, people learned, not from lessons, from repetition. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, Starbucks stores began appearing in more cities, and ordering developed a pattern. This pattern still exists today. That's why ordering feels fast and mechanical. It wasn't designed for speed at first. It was designed for learning. Now let's move to the 1990s. This is when Starbucks truly entered everyday life. In 1992, Starbucks went public. At that time, it had about 165 stores. By 1996, there were more than 1,000. With growth came standardization. Ordering had to become efficient. You couldn't explain drinks anymore. You couldn't slow down. So the language shortened. Instead of, "I would like a latte, please," people said, "latte." Instead of, "What size would you like?" baristas said, "What size?" This was not rudeness. It was survival. Lines were long. Stores were busy. People were impatient. Language adapted. And this is how the modern Starbucks order was born. By the early 2000s, Starbucks was everywhere. Airports, universities, hospitals, office buildings. Coffee prices had increased. A latte now cost $3 to $4. Again, people complained, but they kept paying. Why? Because the ordering experience had become familiar. Familiarity reduces pain. When you know what to expect, price feels less important. This familiarity also affected confidence. People who once felt nervous ordering now spoke automatically. Grande latte, oat milk, to go. No thinking, no fear. This is the moment where Starbucks ordering becomes muscle memory, and muscle memory removes language anxiety. Another interesting detail is names. Before Starbucks, nobody asked for your name when ordering coffee. This was new. As stores became busier, names were introduced to manage volume. Instead of numbers, they used names. This did two things. First, it made the experience feel personal. Second, it forced people to say their name out loud. For immigrants, this was a challenge. Names were misheard, misspelled, mispronounced. So people adapted. They shortened names. They changed names. They used nicknames. This is a powerful language lesson. People don't protect words. They protect understanding. Starbucks normalized adaptation. If a name is difficult, make it easier. If pronunciation is unclear, change it. Communication matters more than identity in that moment. Now let's talk about silence. In diners, waitresses talked constantly. "How are you? What can I get you? More coffee?" In Starbucks, silence became normal. You order, you pay, you wait. No pressure to talk. This silence is intentional. It speeds things up. It reduces mistakes. It reduces emotional labor. This silence also helps non-native speakers, because silence gives you permission not to perform. You don't have to be friendly. You don't have to smile. You just have to communicate. By the 2010s, Starbucks ordering had become almost universal. Even people who never went there understood the structure. Drink, size, milk, name. This structure spread to other cafes. Starbucks didn't just change coffee, it changed how ordering works. And once ordering is standardized, language becomes simpler. This is why Starbucks English feels easier than other English. It is repetitive, predictable, forgiving. This didn't happen by accident. It happened over decades. From 1971 to today, ordering coffee slowly became a language system, a system millions of people use every day without thinking. And when something becomes automatic, fear disappears. In the next part, we move behind the counter. We'll hear what baristas say to each other, how they manage chaos, and how English changes when customers are gone. That's where the language becomes even more real. Everything you've heard so far happens in front of the counter. Customers, orders, short phrases, calm voices. But behind the counter, the language is completely different. faster, messier, more emotional, and much more real. To understand how Starbucks really works, you have to step behind the counter and listen to what baristas say when customers are not listening closely. Because behind the counter, English stops being polite and starts being functional. Let's begin with speed. During busy hours, especially mornings between 7 and 9:30 a.m., a Starbucks store can receive one order every 10 to 15 seconds. That means no full sentences, no explanations, no time to be gentle. Language becomes compressed. Baristas don't say, "Could you please prepare 2 grande lattes?" They say, "2 grande lattes." Sometimes they don't even say that. They shout, "2 grande." Context does the rest. Behind the counter, English is not about clarity for beginners. It's about speed and coordination. Now let's talk about roles. In a busy store, baristas are not doing one job. There is someone on register, someone on espresso, someone on cold drinks, someone on food. Each role has its own language. For example, the person on register speaks to customers. Calm voice, neutral tone, short phrases. But the person on espresso speaks to coworkers. Loud voice, fast voice, sometimes stressed. They say things like, "Where's my milk? I need that shot now. Who took my pitcher?" This English is not polite, but it's not rude either. It's situational. In American work culture, tone changes with urgency. When something is urgent, politeness disappears. This is normal. Now let's talk about abbreviations. Behind the counter, almost nothing is said in full. Drinks become codes. Grande non-fat latte becomes G non-fat. Venti iced caramel macchiato becomes V iced caramel. Milk types are shortened. Temperatures are shortened. Even directions are shortened. This language is learned on the job. No one studies it in advance. Baristas learn by listening, by making mistakes, and by being corrected quickly. This is important because it shows how real English is learned in real workplaces, not through grammar books, through repetition and pressure. Now let's talk about stress. During rush hours, baristas are under constant pressure. Orders stack up, machines are loud, customers are watching. Behind the counter, you'll hear phrases like, "We're backed up," "I'm drowning," "We're slammed." These are not literal. No one is actually drowning. This is emotional language. Workplace English is full of exaggeration. It helps release stress. This kind of language rarely appears in textbooks, but it appears everywhere in real life. Now let's talk about mistakes. Mistakes happen constantly. Wrong milk, wrong size, wrong drink. Behind the counter, baristas say, "Remake that. That one's wrong. I messed it up." They don't explain. They don't apologize to each other. They fix it and move on. This shows an important cultural rule. In fast American workplaces, mistakes are expected. What matters is how fast you recover. Now let's talk about names again, but from behind the counter. When a barista writes a name on a cup, they don't aim for perfection. They aim for recognition. They write what they hear. That's why names are often spelled incorrectly, and no one apologizes. This is not disrespect. It's efficiency. The goal is not to honor identity. The goal is to get the drink to the right person. Understanding this removes a lot of emotional stress for immigrants. It's not personal, it's operational. Now let's talk about humor. Behind the counter, humor is short and dark. Baristas joke about long lines, complicated orders, customers who change their minds. They say things like, "This one's a nightmare. Of course it's oat milk. Why is it always a caramel drizzle?" This humor is not meant to be heard by customers. It's a way to survive pressure. Workplace English often sounds negative, but it's actually bonding language. Complaining together builds teamwork. Now let's talk about silence again. In front of the counter, silence is calm. Behind the counter, silence is dangerous. Silence means something is wrong, someone is confused, or an order is missing. That's why baristas talk constantly to each other. They announce actions out loud. Shots pulling, milk steaming, drinks ready. They don't say this for conversation. They say it for coordination. This kind of English exists only in shared workspaces. Now let's talk about training. New baristas are overwhelmed. They don't understand the language at first. They hear sounds, not words. This is exactly how immigrants feel in English-speaking environments. But something interesting happens. After a few weeks, their brain adjusts. Patterns appear. Sounds become meaning. This is how language acquisition works. Exposure beats explanation. Starbucks unintentionally became one of the biggest informal English training environments in America. Thousands of immigrants have worked there. They learned speed English, workplace English, casual English. Not from lessons, from survival. Now let's talk about hierarchy. Behind the counter, language shows status. Shift supervisors give short commands. Restock, jump on bar, take over register. No please, no explanation. This is normal. In American work culture, direct language equals responsibility. Soft language is used with customers. Direct language is used internally. Understanding this prevents misunderstanding. Many immigrants think they are rude to each other. They are not. They are efficient. Now let's zoom out. Why does all of this matter? Because when customers hear Starbucks English, they are hearing the final, softened version. Behind the counter is where English is raw, fast, unfiltered, messy. This is the English that creates the system. And once the system exists, customers benefit from it. They get short questions, clear options, predictable flow. That's why ordering feels easier over time. You are interacting with a language system that has been refined under pressure for decades. This is not accidental. This is evolution. In the next part, we will step back out from behind the counter and look at the most common mistakes customers make, and why those mistakes don't actually matter. This is where fear disappears completely. Common Starbucks mistakes, and why they don't matter. By the time Starbucks became part of daily American life, millions of people were ordering coffee every single day. And with that scale, mistakes became normal. People order the wrong size. They mispronounce drink names. They change their order at the last second. This happens constantly. And the important thing is this: the system expects it. Starbucks doesn't rely on perfect customers. It relies on a flexible process. That's why baristas don't react emotionally. They correct, adjust, and move on. Mistakes don't stop the system. They're absorbed by it. This is why fear disappears so quickly in this environment. How confidence is built without you noticing. Confidence doesn't arrive in one moment. It grows quietly. The first time you order, you think about every word. The fifth time, you hesitate less. The 10th time, you don't think at all. Nothing dramatic happens, but your behavior changes. Your brain learns, this situation is safe. And when something feels safe, language becomes automatic. This is why people often say, I don't know when my English got better. It didn't suddenly improve. It simply stopped feeling dangerous. Small talk while you wait. After ordering, pressure disappears. And that's when small talk appears. Not deep conversations, just light shared moments. Comments about the weather, the long line, the busy morning. These are not invitations to connect deeply. They're signals of comfort. Short responses are enough. Yeah, pretty busy. Looks like it. This kind of English is easy because it's optional. You can join or stay silent. Both are normal. What people say when they leave. Ending an interaction in Starbucks is simple. Often nothing is said. You take your drink, you nod, you leave. Sometimes you hear, enjoy, have a good one. These phrases don't require a response. Silence is acceptable. This teaches something important. Not every interaction needs a formal ending, and that removes a lot of anxiety for non-native speakers. When English becomes automatic. After enough repetition, something shifts. You stop translating. You stop preparing sentences. Your body responds before your brain does. What size? Grande. This is not confidence you force. This is habit. And habit is stronger than motivation. Once English becomes part of routine, it transfers to other places, stores, work, everyday life. This is how fluency actually grows. Why this model works everywhere. Starbucks didn't succeed because of coffee. It succeeded because of design, short interactions, predictable flow, low emotional cost. These conditions remove fear, and when fear is removed, people adapt naturally. This model works everywhere humans value comfort over performance. Language follows environment, not textbooks. Closing and thank you. This story was never really about coffee. It was about how ordinary places quietly change behavior, how habits replace fear, how repetition creates confidence. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy calm, real stories about everyday life and language, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video.